Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning we're going to meditate few minutes. After the meditation, Venerable Sanatha Vihara is going to give a Dhamma talk. So right now, Chandasara is going to lead the Metta meditation.
Good morning to everybody. Now shall we sit in a comfortable, upright posture. Just focus on gentle breathing in and breathing out. Just focus as breathing happens for a couple of minutes. Just observe. Now shall we spread loving kindness thoughts according to the Karaniyam Artha Kusala Sutta. May all the living beings, including me, be physically well. May all the living beings, including me, be safe. May all the living beings, including me, be mentally well. Let's continue spreading loving kindness thoughts in this way until we hear the bell sound.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Now it's time to start Dhamma talk. Before we start Dhamma talk, I like to say a few things. Next Sunday, which is every Sunday, every month, per Sunday of each month, we are having a meditation 9:30 to 10:30 morning. So next Sunday is the beginning day. If you have time, please come and join. And the temple is open for the public. Every Sunday 10 to 12 is open. People can come and participate for the meditation and Sunday service. Right now, time to start Dhamma talk. Today, our speaker, Venerable Sanatha Vihari, a resident monk at Sarachandra Buddhist Center. He's very busy, he's very famous, especially he's very famous in Latino community, and even he's busy, he accept my invitation. So I thank you so much about your time and energy and doing all the Dhamma work. Venerable Sanatha Vihari, you can start your Dhamma talk right now.
First and foremost, my respects to you, Bhante, and to all the other Bhantes at the International Buddhist Meditation Center. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I would also like to thank the Upasakas and Upasikas for also giving me this opportunity. But before I start, let me pay respects to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So usually for, these kind of Dhamma talks, and most of my Dhamma talks, I just come up with something at the last minute. I try to kind of feel what's going on today, how the day is, and try to feel the crowd and see, try to pick up some things. But so today, while I was sitting in meditation with the rest of you, I was thinking about Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Sila is usually, we think about Sila as in Pancha Sila, the 5 precepts, right? Not to harm or kill living beings, not to take what has not been given, not to have sexual misconduct, to refrain from lying and other forms of bad speech, and to refrain from intoxicating the mind. Sila. Sila means like not to do those things. Then Samadhi, usually translated as concentration, but when we see the different characteristics of Samadhi, we see that Samadhi is really kind of a state of stillness in the mind, a state of tranquility, a state of equipoise, a state of serenity. And then this is achieved through meditation, the practice of meditation. So sometimes when we talk about Samadhi, we're talking about meditation. And then there's Panya. Panya usually, translated as wisdom. But Panya's it's understanding, a level of comprehension is the term that I'm using the most nowadays. But it's a very specific kind of understanding and comprehension. It's about reality, the way things arise and cease, or the way things are, which is impermanent, leading to insatisfactoriness or suffering, we can say, and that they're empty of a permanent, enduring self, an independent self. Anatta, anicca, dukkha, anatta. And panya is not is not fulfilled through just intellectual understanding, but is to be experienced by the wise, personally experienced. It's an experiential knowledge, a jnana. All the jnanas, all the wisdoms, all the knowledges are included within this panya level. What I find very interesting, and I was, very much complicit in this kind of thinking when I first started on, the spiritual path and even in Buddhism. We're all attracted to the things that we like. And when I heard about Buddhism, there's, we all have this image of a lot of meditation, and especially for Buddhist monks, they meditate a lot. And so then I really focused on the meditative practice. And I thought that was the core, that was the real Dhamma. That was the real Dhamma practice. But as I started reading the suttas, I started noticing, especially when it comes to those accounts when people become awakened, they usually became awakened through listening. Most of the accounts is people awakened through listening. And even in the very beginning, we have the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma. Anya Kondanya awakens through listening. So right at the beginning, the first awakened being, besides the Buddha, awakens through listening. And then after the other four ascetics also awaken through listening. When he gave them the no self, the discourse on no self. And also when they went out into this river area where there was many ascetics practicing under Kassapa, not Mahakassapa, another Kassapa. I think there was hundreds, if not thousands, of those kind of fire worshippers where he gave the fire sermon. They all awakened through listening too. And when Venerable Arahant Sariputta, when he was only Upatissa, when he came across Venerable Asaji, what helped him realize the truth, what helped him awaken, was also listening. Listening comes under panya, understanding, experiencing. Although it's in the beginning a bit intellectual, a bit theoretical, or cognitive, we can say, it helps set the ground for the rest of the practice. It helps to know, where we want to go, our destination, what our destination is, and how to get there. So then the Buddha set out this path of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Or we can set it up as Panya, Sila, Samadhi. It's really a cycle, it keeps refreshing itself and feeding into itself all the time. But when we look at the suttas, the path for many, if not most, begins through listening, which goes under panya, understanding. This understanding leads to different motivations, different goals in life, different ways of thinking, a different direction in our life. And this also falls under panya, under comprehension. We change our goals, we change our motivations, we change our direction in life. In which way? Well, there's these three sankappas, usually translated as thoughts, but it's kind of more like a intention or motivation or something like that. First one being nekkhamma, which means renunciation or letting go. And avyapada, which literally means non-hatred, but we can think as loving kindness, metta. And avihimsa, non-cruelty or non-violence, we can think of as karuna, compassion. So in these first two steps on the Noble Eightfold Path, Sammaditthi, Sammasankappa, which fall under panya, which is comprehension and understanding, we change our view of the world, and we change our perspective of the world. We change how we think about the world. We change our motivation. We change our goals. We change how we begin to interpret the world. And through this understanding, our behavior follows our new understanding. In the same way, if you have an idea about you want to become a doctor or a weightlifter, in order to achieve that goal, then your behavior falls in line with that goal. If you want to become a weightlifter, then you have to follow a certain exercise regimen and dietary regimen. And if you want to become a doctor, well, then you need to follow a specific educational pathway to reach your goal, and also do the clinical practice as well. So in a similar way, we have Sila and Samadhi. But first, starting with Sila, because Sila will lead us and facilitate Samadhi. Sila means, we can think about it this way, as the purification of our behavior. Our mind may not be completely pure yet, but we can show restraint. We can not kill, not harm, not steal, not hurt others in other ways, not use abusive speech or lie, and not hurt ourselves through intoxicating our mind, which is going to perturb our mind and will not help us in the stillness and tranquility and serenity of the mind, which is the next step, Samadhi. So this is also another, aspect of the path that I found myself in the beginning, and many other Western practitioners not focusing too much on. We know we have to have good behavior, but what does that mean? Well, we kind of leave it up to ourselves, right? We kind of focus more on meditation, maybe some study, and the behavioral part, we don't really take the time to understand what does that mean. It's not emphasized. You can listen to many Dhamma talks on the internet, and you don't hear many about like behavior, about not to harm and not to do these things. It's either Dhamma talks are very intellectual, very philosophical in nature, and when it isn't time for a Dhamma talk, then it's just meditation. And the practical application of the Dhamma, which is in everyday life where we live most of the time, we're not always reading Dhamma books and suttas or meditating on the cushion. Sila is so important because it's where the Dhamma manifests, in the majority of our life. We can be meditating, we can be studying, but how long do we do that in a day? 10%, 20% of the day? Most of the time is in action. We wake up, we interact with the world, we're in relationship with people. And if you're interacting in such a way that comes from greed, hatred, and delusion, and leads to harming of others and oneself, once it's time for the Samadhi training, for the stilling of the mind, for the calming of the mind, it's going to be very difficult. There's a sutta called in English, With What Purpose? I believe it's in the Samyutta Nikaya. I'll have to look it up right now. And on that occasion, Venerable Ananda, he poses a question to the Buddha. He says, Bhante, what is the purpose? What is the reason for practicing Sila, restraint, good behavior? What's the purpose? Why are we doing this? The Buddha says, to be free from remorse. Then Ananda goes, what's the purpose of being free from remorse? Then the Buddha goes through many steps of many joyful and calm, tranquil states of the mind, and then gets into wisdom and then final liberation. So here in this sutta, With What Purpose, with this interaction between Venerable Ananda and the Buddha, the path starts off with Sila, with behavior. And it's not just to be good for being good. And it's not some self-mortification practice or some austere practice, I mean. It's not a practice of austerity or denying yourself, but it's to be free from remorse, free from shame, free from guilt, free from unwholesome states in the mind. So if we want to achieve samadhi or other, whatever other intended states we have in our meditation practice, then we really need to be working on the purification of our behavior, which includes our speech, our physical actions, and those things that we engage in life, our hobbies, our sports, our job, our career. Whatever we do has to be also in line with Sila. I mean, if you look at the monk's life, 227 precepts, although the last 7 are not really precepts, they're just ways to kind of solve quarrels and problems. And there's so many hundreds and thousands of minor precepts. What is that? That's Sila. So Sila's a very important part, of the Buddhist practice that facilitates the training. What is the monk's life but just, working on Sila, more Sila. That's what makes you a monk. What makes a bhikkhu is the taking of these precepts. The upasampada means now you have taken all these 227 precepts. That's what makes you a monk. Not because you meditate a lot, not because you recite a lot of chants or a lot of Buddhism or any of these things, or you have all these cool Buddhist statues. What makes a bhikkhu is his Sila. And what stops a bhikkhu from being a bhikkhu? A break in Sila. It's not a break in meditation, it's not a break in panya, it's a break in Sila behavior. Sila is so important. But I feel like it's overlooked, and I think because, as in the West, it's not, people take it as like, oh, they're trying to control me, trying to tell me what to do, and it kind of brings up some bitterness of our previous experience with society and religion, attempting to guilt trip us or control us or restrain us and in what we're trying to do. But that's not the approach in Buddhism, because before Sila, we saw that in Samma Sankappa, our actions are driven by our motivation, and our motivations are letting go, which is renunciation, loving kindness, and compassion. So then our actions have to be in line with our goals in order for us to achieve those goals. Then we have samadhi. And also here, there's another thing that we kind of miss a lot in the West. We start off samadhi with samma vayama, usually translated as right effort. And within this, we find the Chattaripattanas, the 4 strivings, which is, the first one is really like Sila. It's really a Sila practice, and they're snuck into the meditation, which is called Indriya Samvara. Guarding the senses, right? Protecting your senses, restraining the senses, things that you shouldn't do, right? You should guard your senses from things that will lead to unwholesome states. That's actually what the first training for monks is, to practice this Indriya Samvara, sense restraint. Before they practice meditation and they start learning like to memorize the suttas and all these other things, the first practice that the monks need to practice is Indriya Samvara. Why? If they don't practice sense restraint, they're going to stop being a monk and they'll just go back to their regular life. Also, for lay people, if you don't control your senses, you're going to just give up on the 5 precepts and return to the regular ways of the world. The next one is pahana. Pahana means to eliminate, to get rid of, to remove. And here we have something very interesting where the Buddha talks about replacing an unwholesome thought with a wholesome thought. There's 2 very powerful suttas that help us understand this. The Dvaita Vitaka Sutta, 2 kinds of thoughts, where the Buddha talks about Samma Sankappa, and how renunciation is the counter to, or the remedy to, greed and lust, and how loving kindness is the antidote to hatred and ill will, and how compassion, karuna, is the antidote to cruelty and violence. So when a thought, a greedy thought, a hateful thought, a violent thought arises in the mind, one should replace it with a wholesome thought, a thought of renunciation, a thought of loving kindness, a thought of compassion. Nowadays, it's very popular to just be aware of the thoughts without intervening in them. And that is a powerful practice, but that comes after this practice. The practice of samasati, satipatthana, mindfulness, comes after that. And even that, observing the thoughts, is at a deeper level of the satipatthana practice. Depending on how you want to categorize thoughts, it can either be in chittanupassana or dhammanupassana. So it's more of an intermediate advanced practice. In the beginning, we need to change these patterns, these thinking patterns that we have. We need to intervene. When an unwholesome thought arises, we need to intervene and not just observe it, not just be mindful. It requires action. I love this one joke that Ajahn Brahm tells about a guard, right? There's this security guard taking care of a very beautiful mansion, and the owner, she says that she's going to leave, and she tells the security guard to be very mindful when she's gone. So she leaves on vacation, and she comes back, and she notices that everything's missing from the house. And she tells the security guard, "Didn't I tell you to be mindful?" He says, "Yes, I was very mindful. Mindful when the thieves walked in, mindful when they picked up the TV, mindful when they picked up the couch. I was mindful when they took everything out. I was 100% mindful the whole time." Being mindful in of itself is not going to stop the bad things from happening, even in your own mind. It provides you some distance and perspective, some relief from them. But there needs to be an intervention. That is replacing an unwholesome thought with a wholesome thought. And there's other interventions that the Buddha gives us too on how to manage our thinking in the following sutta called the Vitakka Santana Sutta. Vitakka means thoughts, and Santana means to calm, to tranquilize the thoughts. Then we get into the other parts of the Samadhi training, which the Satipatthana, Kayanupassana, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana, right? Observing the body, observing the feelings, the feeling tone, right? Observing chitta, let's say states of mind, and dhammas, we can say concepts or particular things. These particular things that are highlighted out of the 7 factors of awakening and the 5 hindrances, to observe them when they're present and observe when they're absent. To be aware when they're present and to be aware when they're absent. Then from there, we get into the sequence of jhana, 1 through 5. And we look at this process also, we see how the mind becomes less perturbed. It becomes more still, calm, and peaceful and serene in this process, until the mind reaches complete stillness and complete serenity, complete equanimity. So before I finish today, I would just like to think of you. I would like to invite you to kind of, take these things into consideration and try to bring more emphasis into the purification of behavior on your sila. Bring more emphasis into your purification of the mind. Here meaning like, temperament, emotions, these kind of disturbing feelings, the chitta part, and purification of your thinking, your perspective, your view. And if you find problems in your meditation, that might be telling you, hey, I need to maybe level up on my panya more, on my understanding, my comprehension of the Dhamma. Or maybe there's something I need to do with my behavior, my lifestyle. There needs to be some changes in my lifestyle. And some of them might be very subtle, right? Maybe reducing purchases on Amazon, not spending so much time on social media or Netflix. Maybe just being kind to people, actually making face contact at the store when you're at Target and saying, thank you. Small gestures of kindness. A lot of the work is in these subtle things, because these are these small things, because those are the ones we do the most. So I guess that's all I have for today. I always like to leave some time for questions, comments, concerns, or whatever. So now is the time. I know we have shorter time than usual, but I like to open it up for those of you who have any questions. I think John would like to speak. If we can unmute John.
Thank
There
you.
we go.
Yeah, thank you for that talk. Any advice on how to replace unwholesome thoughts with wholesome thoughts? Because sometimes unwholesome thoughts are invasive or repetitive. And you know that, like let's say you want junk food, or there's things that your mind will go to that aren't good for you, but you'll keep they keep calling, right? And they have power. Like any advice on how to replace?
Yes. So you would just want to do something else, and that something else needs to be something wholesome. So like if you were to want to now start brushing your teeth with your left hand instead of your right, every morning when you go to brush your teeth, your right hand is automatically going to reach for it, right? Because you're just used to it. But you got to be like, no, I got to use my left hand. And you might catch yourself halfway brushing your teeth. Oh, I'm supposed to use my left. And then you use your left. So it's a struggle, to be honest. So you just have to keep at it. There needs this effort. That's why it's called Vayama. Vayama means effort, or Padana means striving. There is this kind of force that needs to come into the practice, where we're on it all the time, right? So you might want to journal. You might want to write something down to help you accomplish. You might want to share whatever changes you want to make with other people, because sharing with other people helps us, really like practice it more when we know other people are watching us, to make sure if keeping tabs on us if we're doing it or not. So then in the beginning, it's just really, really, really a struggle. In the beginning, when I started practicing this, when I was on the bus, when I was at the gym, anytime I had free time, I would just practice, may I be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. May others be well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. And even if we just focus on metta, metta helps us overcome anger, overcome sadness, overcome fear. So just this practice of loving kindness, it's going to spill into different dimensions of our mind, and it's going to help us with many of these other kind of disturbing thoughts. But to be very honest, it's just work. We just got to do the work over and over. Accountability, holding ourselves accountable.
Thank you.
But there's that sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 19 or 20, Middle Discourses, which is called Vitakka Santana Sutta. And the Buddha gives 5 ways to work with intrusive thoughts.
Where can I find that?
I'll find the link. I'll link it right now. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
There we go. Oh, it's number 20. Yeah, number 20. It's in the chat. Kathy.
Yes, thank you so much for this really, really profound and meaningful at this particular moment for me, Dharma talk. I come from a Jewish background, and this is the eve of the high holidays, where we reflect on our actions of the previous year and commit to a better living going forward. What I would like to ask about is some of my meditation teachers, for example, natural awareness meditation, and also my mental health practitioners, so it's like psychologists, talk about judgment and to not be judgmental. On the flip side, there's this idea of wholesome and unwholesome.
Mm-hmm.
So can you distinguish between judgment, between those two?
Mm-hmm. So here I think that the Buddha does talk about discernment. So we need to discern what is wholesome and unwholesome. And, from my understanding of how Jon Kabat-Zinn introduced being non-judgmental, that means basically don't beat yourself up. That's what it means, right? Non-judgmental doesn't mean you don't know what's good or bad. That's not what he means by that. He means you don't beat yourself up over the thoughts like, oh, I had an angry thought. Oh, I must be a horrible person. No, don't do that. It's just an angry thought, right? But you recognize it as an angry thought. You recognize that it's unwholesome, and you work on eliminating that unwholesome thought and cultivating a wholesome thought. So, you can think about discernment. We really want to work on discernment between what is wholesome and unwholesome.
If anybody have any question, you can ask. Chansar.
Hello. Thank you. I've seen before like this graph that maps out the path of the meditator. And I don't remember the word or the name for this part of the meditation practice, but it has something to do with grief and sadness. Like as awareness builds, you come into grief and sadness. And I'm wondering if that is something that you can speak to.
Thank you for that question, because you're touching or heading us towards one of the most important aspects of the path. So earlier I mentioned the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first discourse that the Buddha gave. How does he start that discourse? Right? There is suffering. That's the first thing he teaches, right? In all the ways of suffering, and all distress and being exhausted and grief, lamentation, pain. And then when we get halfway through the sutta, these Four Noble Truths are not something that you just believe or memorize. There's actually something we need to engage and experience for ourselves. And in the first part, there's 3 trainings to the First Noble Truth. First one is to recognize suffering. Second one is to attempt to working on understanding suffering. And the third part is understood suffering. So the Buddha actually invites us to look at grief, to look at sadness, to look at pain, to look at unsatisfactoriness. We have to investigate these things and see how they arise and how they cease. See the causes and conditions that lead to lamentation, grief, suffering, and pain. Skillfully, right? Skillfully look at them. Because it's very easy to be overwhelmed by them. So it's always good to have kalyanamitas, good friends to support you in your practice, to have a teacher, to have a place, to study, to put all the resources that you have available to help you understand suffering, to help you understand grief. So it's not something that we try to sugarcoat, like with loving kindness. May all beings be well. No, forget about all suffering in the world. May they all be well. No, we're not doing that, right? And we're not retreating to our own meditative cushion where we're nice and safe and forget about whatever's going on in the world. We need to look at suffering. If we look at what inspired the Bodhisattva to become the Buddha, was seeing suffering in the world, right? He walked out of the palace. He saw an old person, a sick person, a dead person. He's like, wow, I need to do something. So looking at suffering, looking at your own sadness and the sadness in others can be a catalyst and can be fuel on the path. So it's about using it skillfully and being careful that you're not overwhelmed, and knowing what your triggers are and how much you can deal, like how much you can practice and how much you can focus and observe at a particular time in your life. I don't know if that was useful or not.
Yes, thank you. I'm working on not being overwhelmed by it.
Mr. Nam want to say something? Yes.
Hi, Bante. Thank you for the Dhamma talk today. My name is Nam. I think you remember me.
Yes, of course.
My experience with the practice, Dhamma practice, I relate too much about the Sila. You know, since I understand more about the Sila, can the protect me. Since I practice, the more I practice, the more I feel the senses of happiness toward to me, and I feel more people around me treat me nicer, and I think I can make the people around me happier. That's my experience, and for that, that's when I sitting meditation, because I keep my Sila better. The more I keep my Sila better, the more my meditation is better, more calm, more easier. So this is, I want to share with you my experience, practice, and about keep 5 precepts for the late life people. Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, for sharing your testimony with us. And, it's not just theory. You have someone here who has experienced it for themselves. If you practice more Sila, your Samadhi will be a lot deeper. So that's why it's so important to associate with good friends, Kalyanamitas, right? The path is impossible without Kalyanamitas, the Buddha said. So events like this, coming to the temple, even if you're online only, are some of the best ways to support your practice. We need to engage and come together. Sangha means congregation, to come together, right? So that's pivotal. Without a Sangha, without Kalyanamitas, you're just wandering in the darkness by yourself, not knowing where you're going. So I'm very thankful that Bante has, and has continued this program at the International Buddhist Meditation Center. And how he's expanded it now to include online. Before it was just in person, but now people from all over can join online. So everyone's so fortunate to be part of the International Buddhist Meditation Center. And, thank you, Bante, for spreading the Dhamma and inviting me here and giving all these opportunities to everyone.
Thank you, Venerable Sanatha Vihari. We really appreciate about your service and your time and energy. We'll talk again next time. After 2 months, maybe I will invite for you again around November or December. Right now, we're going to chant the page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dhamma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shadow of grief and the sick fly happily. Nguyện di thực không đức phổ cả ư nhân đi ngã đặng dự chung sanh giai cộng an Phật đạo. Nguyện di thực không đức phổ cả ư nhân đi ngã đặng dự chung sanh giai cộng an Phật đạo. Nguyện di thực không đức phổ cả ư nhân đi ngã đặng dự chung sanh Thank you for everybody. Next Sunday, coming Sunday, Reverend Kusala is going to give a Dhamma talk. Actually, next Sunday around 9:30 to 10:30, we have 1 hour meditation program also. Come and join. Thanks again, Venerable Sanatha Vihari. Thanks for everybody who have participated. Hope to see you again next week. And temple is open every Sunday, 10 to 12. So come and join with us. By the power of the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, you all be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.